Welcome, everyone, to the Clear Admit MBA Essay Insight webinar series. I'm Graham Richmond. I'm the co-founder of Clear Admit, and I just want to welcome everyone. We're going to give you a few minutes to sign in here. And as always, those of you who've been joining us in past weeks know, jump into the chat box and just share where it is that you're tuning in from. Because I know for some of you, it's bedtime. Others, maybe you're just starting your day on the western side of the United States. I see Ghana. So just let us know where you're coming from. India, DC, Austria, so kind of dinner time in Austria, Austin, Boston. I don't know if there are any other going to rhyme with that. Anyway, I cannot keep up anymore because there are too many names coming in or locations, but welcome to all of you tuning in. I see a couple of people in Paris, which is where I happen to be located. So nice to see some locals joining us. So we're going to get started in a moment. And just to go over kind of the structure while we're waiting for everyone to kind of jump on, we'll spend about 45 minutes or so chatting with our panelists today. We have panelists from Michigan Ross, the Wharton School, UVA Darden, as well as Yale School of Management. So we're going to talk with our panelists for about 45 minutes, and then each of our panelists is going to bounce off into an individual Zoom where you can ask them questions. And so we'll get you the links for those individual Zooms at the end because we want to make sure that our panelists can actually get themselves set up before we send you off into their rooms. But anyway, I did want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us. I know some of you have been with us the last couple of weeks. So I think we can probably get started. We're at the top of the hour and seems like we have a critical mass of individuals who've jumped on. So again, welcome everyone. I'm Graham. I'm the co-founder of Clear Admit. I'm going to moderate today's session and let's meet each of our panelists. I just want to quickly introduce everyone, let you know who's joining us. So let's start with Brad Rosenwinkel, who is an associate director for full-time MBA admissions at Michigan Ross. Welcome, Brad. It's great to have you this time.
Thanks, Graham. Great to see everyone on here. Look forward to sharing some additional insights. As Graham shared, I'm Brad Rosenwinkel from Michigan Ross. Been here for just over a year, but worked in the industry, a number of different schools. Great to see some familiar faces here today.
Excellent. Thanks, Brad. Next up, we're also going to hear from Jeb Butler, who's Director of Operations at Wharton University, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Jeb.
Hi, everyone. Jeb Butler, Director of Operations, one of the co-chairs of the admissions committee at the Wharton School. I'm really just excited to be here to answer your questions and help you learn a little bit more about the essays. I know they're kind of daunting at first blush, but with any luck, by the end of this session, you'll feel much more confident. Good to see you all.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jeb. It's great to have you back. Next up, we're going to hear from Catherine Alford. She's Director of Admissions for the Future Year Scholars Program at University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. Hey, Catherine.
Hi, Graham. Thanks for having me, and thanks for using my updated photo. I'm so excited to have a profile photo that's actually current. It's great to be here. I love talking about essays. I do think they are one of the most overthought parts of the MBA application, and so hopefully by being here today, we will take away a lot of the stress and overthinking and allow you to write your strongest application essays.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Catherine. And then last but not least, we have Laurel Grodman, who is the Assistant Dean for Admissions at the Yale School of Management. Hey, Laurel, great to have you.
Thanks so much, Graham. As you know, this is one of my favorite events, so very happy to be doing this.
Oh, it's nice of you to say that. So let's start with some quick kind of roundtable questions, and we'll start with you, Brad. I wanted to get a better sense as to when you look at essays in an application. Is it like the first thing you do or the last, or where does it fit when you pick up a file? And what do you enjoy when you're what do you enjoy about the essays?
Yeah, great questions. I think first and foremost, I want to say there's no magic formula to this. I think a lot of times there's a misconception that, we're looking for specific things there as well. And, for me, it varies from application to application. When I dig in, personally to the essays, it tends to be somewhere in the middle, right? There's not a specific path that I'm going through each application. Try to change it up because we're reading hundreds and thousands of applications, and it's good to have a process, but it's also good to change it up and add some spice to the review process there as well. So in terms of when I personally read applications. It kind of comes, as I'm looking through the application, you get a sense of who the student is, where they're coming from. I like to, obviously see name, kind of where they're from geographically, take a glance at the resume and get a sense of, where they've been. And then I start to look at the essay, perhaps in terms of where they want to go and how it all sort of ties together. But a lot of pieces and parts that I'm sure we'll dig into.
All right. Thanks. Appreciate that. So Jeb, how about you? How does it work for you over at Wharton? When are you reading the essays and what do you enjoy about reading essays?
Sure. So I'm a creature of habit, so I always read the essays at the same time. And this was kind of arbitrary, frankly, based on the way that our application system sets it up in the system that we read in. So the essays for me come last. So that's when I read them. For me, I think what's most enjoyable at that juncture is the fact that by that point, you know a decent amount about the candidate, but by the time you get to the essays, you're really looking for them to pop off the screen because for all intents and purposes, they're just a PDF. So the essays for me is when an applicant becomes more three-dimensional. So that's the part I enjoy the most. That's when I feel like I'm having more of a conversation with an applicant as opposed to going through some more transactional things like a resume or a transcript. So I think that the essays allow me to foster a relationship with the candidate, even if they're not directly in front of me physically.
Got it. And you're actually making a really interesting point. This idea that, you're kind of looking at and then Brad said this too, you're looking at the sort of basic stuff first, the data forms and the resume or those types of components. And then, the essays kind of bring it all to life. And I think it's just important for candidates tuning in to remember the importance of those application forms, which are often, for better or for worse, left to the last minute. Everyone focuses on the essays, the recs, everything else, and then they kind of scramble to fill out the data forms. But in many cases, and we've been doing these sessions for a couple of weeks now, it sounds like a lot of you are seeing the data forms first before you read the essays. But let's see if that holds true with our other panelists. So Catherine, when do you read the essays at Darden? And what do you like about reading them?
Right after the data forms, Graham. I read the data forms and then I read the essays. And kind of to Jeb's point, this is where the applicant kind of pops off the screen and becomes a little bit more three-dimensional. I really enjoy reading the essays because it's finally, we get to hear your own voice. The rest, the other parts of your application are a little formulaic. Here's a form field and you need to fill it in, or looking at your transcript, what you've done, etc. But in the essays, we can get a little bit more of your personality and hear a little bit more about what's most important to you to convey to the admissions committee.
Got it. Okay. That's perfect. And then Laurel, how about you? How's it done at Yale? And I actually, maybe others can just kind of nod, but I'm wondering whether everyone on the team has to do it the same way or whether there's sort of flexibility, so within your team, Laurel, do people have sort of freedom as to when they read the essays, or is it kind of like, oh no, the system spits it out in a certain way and you have to read it that way?
They do have freedom, although we've intentionally set up our reader with kind of a suggested flow. So I suspect many people do sort of follow the order that I read in, which is looking at the data form. Again, this will be maybe the one opportunity to get to plug that form because we're never going to have a data form bespoke session. But it is really, really important to be able to summarize your info in a digestible way. But I tend to kind of review academic history next, work history next with your resume and your letters of rec, and then I read essays. The one exception I'll mention is within the Yale process, everybody who we are, after having gone through the review process, is likely to not receive an offer of admission. I take a final look at, as well as Bruce Delmonico, who co-leads the office. And I actually start with the data form, but I go right to the essay after that, just to make sure that there's nothing in there that I need to know that sets context for everything else that's going to come within that final pass. So that's an occasion where the essay comes up real quickly.
Okay, got it. And I feel like that's actually reassuring in the sense that candidates are putting a lot of time and effort into their essays, many, many hours. And I think sometimes they feel like, oh, one person's going to glance at it for 10 minutes, toss it aside. But what you're saying is even after a file has been reviewed by some of your peers on the committee, that if they've been flagged as not going to, they're not going to be admitted, it still goes to you or Bruce for another read, just to be sure. So I just want to underline that because I think that it's just really important for candidates to know that, they really are getting, in many cases, 2, if not 3 kind of full on reads of their file before a final decision is rendered. So keep that in mind, everyone, as you're working on your essays. That really does get sort of due time. So let's move on to the next section, and we'll go back to Brad. And Brad, just to kind of walk you through this, the idea here is we have a slide up, right, with your essay questions. And so what I want you to do is just pick one of them and shed some light on it. Like, tell us a little bit about why the committee is kind of asking this question, maybe what they're looking for, and any tips that you have for someone who's just sitting down to kind of, start work on the essay that you're going to describe for us.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Graham. I think first off, how do we come up with these questions, right? And, specific to Ross, or generally speaking, but I can obviously speak, specifically to Ross now, is that, we try to look at the end of each cycle, our application holistically, and what information did we feel like wasn't helpful as we were reviewing applications, and what information do we feel like we were missing or needed to get more of out of our application as we read throughout the year. We're making notes as we go through about each candidate, but we're also making notes to ourselves of, I really wish I knew more about candidates holistically in the entire applicant pool in this way, or this information that I'm reading in each application I don't find helpful. One of two kind of things there that we're looking at, and so at the end of the year we kind of get to that point and we compile that as a team. We talk and discuss those things, and we really kind of centralize around a few different things. Usually not anything major, drastic from year to year, as Graham and others on this call that have done this for years know. Many times it's new to the candidates, there as they're starting the process each year, but for us it's not too much of a change from year to year. And I think when you look at the Michigan Ross questions, we really try to get to know, part of our culture is getting to know the students and building that community, getting to know, what aspect, what experiences they have that they can share and can contribute to their classmates, whether it's personal or professional. We get that question a lot. Should I write, personal experiences, professional experiences? Where should I focus? We don't really have a preference there. We simply are, as you look at these types of questions, and Graham, I know your team does a great job of sort of analyzing each of our schools' questions, there as well, and putting some thoughts, there. But, simply put, we're trying to get to know the candidate, what's important to them. You'll see some of our questions sort of evolve around this idea of EQ, emotional intelligence, self-awareness. What experiences have you had? What did you take from those experiences? How have they helped you in your career or in your life? When were you out of your comfort zone? How did you manage and handle that? Personally, and how have you grown and learned from those things? So not just, giving us the context at that particular moment in time, but also what you took from that experience there as well, and moving forward, along those different types of things. So our short answer prompts, there in essay 1, we ask students to pick one question from the first 3 prompts and one question from the second 3 prompts. That's important to note, that you don't have to answer all 6 prompts. It's only 2 within that first essay, but really just an opportunity for us to get to know you, your experiences. Everybody has different experiences. That's some of the fun of reading these, is learning the different things that people bring to the table, the challenges that they've been through, the things that they've discovered about themselves in the process there as well.
Yeah, and I was going to say, so first of all, I appreciate Mike on our team is kind of adjusting, because the slide is a little, the groups are kind of weird here. But as you can see, the left side is group 1. I want people to know that I made a difference when I was aware that I was different when. And then so you pick one from that group and then one from that second group. And I wanted to ask you if you're willing to do a little bit of a deeper dive on this, which is, it seems to me like, there's sort of this there's like a rationale for grouping them this way, right? So I feel like group 1 is kind of like a chance to talk about almost an accomplishment or something that you're really proud of, whereas group 2 feels a bit more not about necessarily failure, but about, I guess you talked about like measuring EQ, right? So it's like whether or not people are able to talk about times when they've been out of their comfort zone or when they were humbled or challenged, et cetera. So I presume that's conscious. And so you're looking for kind of that duality in these responses, but anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, Graham, I think, part of it might be consciously grouping them this way. I think probably the way that it came about was, our team, talking about, here are maybe some ideas or some, once we decide to go this direction, here are some things, some prompts that might be interesting to get answers to, right? And so then we came up with, a whole list, narrowed it down to these 6, and we decided, okay, well, if we want candidates to pick 2 and we want to try to group them, how do they most naturally fit together? So to your point, yes, I think there might have been some thought behind how do we group them. I don't know if that was the intent from the beginning, to be honest. But they do kind of sort of fall together, and I think they build on each other in a way. They're completely different groups. But the first set is, candidates always want to share their accomplishments, right? They feel like I have to talk about myself and the great things that I've done in my application, for the admissions committee. The first does lean a little bit more towards that. It allows candidates to get that off their chest, so to speak, and then really take a step back in that second group and be more reflective, internally introspective in how they've grown and the things that they've learned and some of the challenges that they faced and what they took from those things.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. I appreciate you kind of delving into that a little. I actually love the way this is set up. And I think it just, I mean, not only is there interesting kind of flexibility in terms of, giving people choices, and not, that they can pick one out of each of the 3. So it just seems to give them a lot of flexibility, but also I love what I view as these sort of 2 types of question. So it must be great on your end to kind of read these. But yeah, appreciate you shedding light. I did want to ask you one other, just really quick before we move on and talk with Jeb about Wharton's essays. I wanted to ask you one really quick question, which is about the career goals essay number 2, and that last phrase, why is this the right goal for you? That's kind of different. It's not something we see very often. Usually schools are saying, what's your short-term career goal? Maybe what's your long-term, and why do you want to do it? But what's the kind of rationale behind this right goal for you piece?
Yeah, I think that, I look at that, also given my experience in the industry, Graham, and others on this call too can probably reflect on this, is oftentimes candidates are like, this is what I want to do, and this is how I see myself getting there. And they fail to explain how that makes sense, right? Particularly if you're looking to shift careers, make a pivot in some way or another. Not that it's impossible. 93% of our students at Ross are career changers. It's a huge number, but we want to understand, have you taken the time to not only say, this is what I want to do, but understand why you want to do that and understand the experience that you have, how you see yourself making that career pivot, that career change potentially, and how that all ties together. Having worked again at other schools that have different phrases, we all sort of ask the same thing, but in different ways, right? And I think, I like this question here at Ross of, why is this right for you? It sort of leads the candidates to talk a little bit more about, their thought process behind it and how they see themselves making that change, rather than saying, this is my dream job, this is where I want to go,
Right.
leaving it at that. The admissions committee doesn't necessarily, hopefully, have to struggle with this prompt where it leads the students to explain why and how that they see that happen.
Got it. Okay. Appreciate you shedding light on that. Let's move along. We're going to now, Jeb, I'm going to give you the floor. Same rules apply. Take us through one of your essay questions. I think we have a slide here with both questions here. And yeah, just pick one and walk us through it. Where did it come from? Any tips you have, et cetera?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to be focusing on the second prompt. And thinking about, both essay questions, we as a team decided, I think this is the 4th cycle that we're using these questions, so we really haven't deviated over the last couple of years, and that was pretty intentional just because we track responses and we track pretty much the whole application in terms of outcomes. So we're a very data-driven school. So that is part of the reason for that. But another part is we really feel that our 2 questions map to kind of the 3 major buckets that we're looking for and when we're reading for admissions: community, classroom, and career. And through the questions, we feel that candidates are able to address kind of all 3 of these buckets for us in a meaningful and substantive way. And I think the second essay in particular is reflective of our values because Wharton is a very community-based environment. I'm incredibly candid with applicants when I indicate if you're not interested in a team-oriented environment, Wharton's probably not a good place for you. The 2 years are packed with team, and I think it's a place where our students understand that individual success is really predicated on community success. So I think for that reason, we wanted to ensure that one of our essay questions certainly reflected that. So when I'm looking at this question, and for me, this is kind of where I can see where the applicant's heart is a little bit, right? They're not talking about their grades or their test scores, which becomes a little bit robotic, or their future goals, which is, I think not, I mean, it can be connected to passions for sure, but this is where you see things that really reflect, maybe an interest that they don't really have time to nurture very much, but they love a lot, right? Or a way that they want to impact a community in a special way, or it just tells you something unique about the applicant that they may not be able to convey in other components, just because, and I know all of my colleagues do this, we really want applicants to be strategic with the application and use the application to give a well-rounded version of yourself and to use the components to convey different things about yourself that we may not be able to glean otherwise. So for me, I can see how this person would first and foremost fit within the community insofar as they want to be there and they want to be active participants, right? It's a general matter. We want people to be more givers than they are takers of the community. Obviously, we want people to use resources, but really, how are you going to make an impact? So for me, I'm thinking very clearly about how the person is going to make community impact. I think a common approach for this essay really is people often meditate on something that's important to them. Maybe it's an experience, maybe it's something in terms of a volunteer experience, an extracurricular experience, it could be a personal experience. And then they use that to pivot into how they plan to make specific impact. And a lot of people will talk about, leadership positions they may want to hold on campus, or a club, organization, or initiative that they may want to start that Wharton doesn't have, because that's something that's rather easily accommodated at the Wharton School and something that happens regularly. So we're always excited to see it. It may be it may be a personal attribute that they feel will be helpful in the community. It might be a very specified knowledge. It might be someone coming from a background that isn't traditionally seen in business school that they might be able to leverage in a learning team, right? There's no right or wrong way to go about this. I mean, we do hope to see some modicum of research into Wharton in both questions, but we don't want it to look like a laundry list or you're cutting and pasting from the website, right? So again, there's no right or wrong approach here, but I think a really helpful kind of pre-writing exercise, put yourself in the shoes of a Wharton alumnus. Looking back, what was your impact on the community? What legacy did you leave here? And I know Wharton's a big school, but we do take this on a very individual basis, and we do feel that individuals can make meaningful impact even in the largest of communities. So really, what was your impact? That's really kind of our approach to it.
Got it. Yeah, that's very helpful. I kind of feel like I would have enjoyed writing this kind of essay before going to business school, because it forces you to sort of think through how you want to spend your time in a meaningful way on campus and what you're bringing, to the table. I did want to ask you a question about the first essay,
Sure.
Since we didn't really talk about that one. This one, there's again, it's sort of a career goals essay. We see a lot of these. The only thing that's interesting to me, or that I wanted to kind of ask you about at least, is this line where it says achieve your future professional goals. And, maybe I'm being nitpicky about that word professional, but I think, in some instances, people go to business school for kind of leadership growth or some aspect of like sort of personal growth too. And I'm wondering, how much leeway does a candidate have, or does this need to be all kind of like, oh, I'm, this is what I want to do. This is the company, these are the kind of courses I need to take to get there, et cetera. Or is there some aspect of the personal side too?
Sure. Well, I mean, first and foremost, I appreciate the close reading of our question. We parse the words very carefully, so certainly appreciate that from you, Graham. But stepping back, right? What are we trying to get from this? We always want to ensure that anyone who is applying to Wharton and ultimately matriculates is going to be able to achieve their career goals by coming here. We don't want to admit folks where there's a mismatch between your goals and getting an MBA. We don't shy around the fact, and I don't think any of us do, MBAs are expensive. So there should be a clear path here, right? So for that reason, we do tend to look for maybe some modicum of a career map. Short and long-term goals are helpful. But if it makes sense within the arc of the candidate's narrative to include personal growth, personal goals, include them. And I think most candidates do. I think most candidates do feel comfortable, reiterating, and I think they're self-aware enough to say, okay, these are kind of the gaps that I have right now. This is how business school can help me get here. And I think if candidates can kind of get out of their heads a little bit and not necessarily think that they need to look like, automatons who are just looking to, land at the big three or whatever. Those goals are fine, but what else does it mean in terms of your growth? So while we are interested in the professional angle, because MBA programs are outcomes-based programs, where are you going to land afterward? And we want to make sure that we can help accommodate that. But if you can weave in personal elements, please do. We're always happy to read them. And I think it makes for a more well-rounded response.
Yeah, that great advice. I appreciate you humoring me with the close reading of the of the terms and the kind of wording that's used here. Let's move on and talk with Catherine a little bit about the essays at UVA Darden. Catherine, yeah, feel free to guide us wherever you want and take us through one of these questions. And yeah, where did your team come up with it, and what are you looking for, et cetera?
Yeah, thanks. So I was paying attention to the other admissions reps who are here and the things that they are saying as well. And one of the things that we've been talking about is being strategic, and also Jeff mentioned a pre-writing exercise. And I think that when you begin applying to MBA programs, it's important to think of it as a storytelling exercise and to spend some time thinking about the story that you're telling about yourself. And that arguably is the hardest part about applying to business school, is really understanding your story, who you are, what you've achieved, what's motivated you to do the things that you've done. And in this work, you should be pulling out aspects of your experiences that are things that you're going to want to highlight in your MBA essays, and then looking at the essays where you're applying and seeing how you can weave the different aspects of who you are into the essay prompts. So make the essays work for you rather than feeling like the essays are going to have to force you into a specific space. When you look at Darden's essays, I think the most number of questions that I received are around the first question, the community of belonging. What would you want your classmates to know about you that is not on your resume? And that's probably because there's so many different directions that you can take this response. And it should be unique to you and your own personality. There is no right way to respond to this question. But it's important to think about, at Darden, we think of students as very holistic beings with a lot of different interests and strengths outside of just their academics and their professional experience. And so what are the things that you really care about that are very important to you? For example, at Darden, our students run and lead the school. Student governance is one of the largest organizations at Darden. And so we're looking for the types of people who are going to plug into the community, be leaders in the space, make the Darden school a better place for the classes that are coming behind them. And so perhaps this is a way that you can highlight some of the ways that you've really invested into the communities that you've been a part of, whether they be professional or whether they be in your community where you grew up, or where you went to school, where have you made an impact, and maybe in a way that's not necessarily written about in your resume points.
Got it. And I know that the resume question is it's one that people talk a lot about, and we actually will it's kind of a spoiler alert. We're going to talk a little bit more about it later in this session in a fun way. I did want to kind of ask you about short answer number 3. And if you'll humor me, I kind of have 2 questions. So one is specifically about number 3 and this idea that you have the words "at this time." And I kind of find that interesting because I do know that, people's goals change. There's a lot that happens when you're in business school. And I think it's rare that someone's essay about their goals actually, exactly reflects what they ultimately do when they graduate. But is that, tell me a little bit about where that came from, this kind of decision to use those words.
I think people felt pressure to know exactly what it is that they wanted to do when they finished their MBA program, when they hadn't even started their MBA program yet or been exposed to all the different opportunities that you have coming out of an MBA program. And so what's most important to us is that you've begun to think about it. Recruiting in MBA programs starts early. While in undergrad, you had 4 years to explore, try out some different internships and experiences. Students in MBA programs have about 1 or 2 weeks before companies are there and are ready to talk to students and to hear from the students why they want to come work for such and such company. And so it's important that you've done some work to think about what might be a good fit for you. But we also understand that things are going to shift. And frankly, the market's going to shift as well. There are going to be more opportunities in different industries, at different graduation years. We just don't know what that will be at the time you're applying.
Right. Great point. Last thing I wanted to ask you about your essays is, you have the essay questions, but then there are these kind of headings, community of belonging, inclusive impact, careers with purpose. And it's really interesting how those words above the question kind of shape how one might view the question, right? And so, and I don't think you used to have, I don't know that it used to be that way. Like last year, for example, did it say community of belonging last year above maybe it did, but so what's the rationale behind including those? Is it to kind of guide people a little bit or?
Yeah, it's a signal. I mean, it's just as much as you're sending signals to MBA programs with your responses, we are sending signals to applicants about our values and the essays that we're all asking you. And so at Darden, a community of belonging where everybody feels like they can bring their best self, an inclusive community where people feel like they are part of the group and included in everything that happens is another important value of the school. And then also feeling like you're coming to school to have a career with purpose, with impact is also an important value of the school. So these are just ways that we are signaling to applicants what our values are, and then hoping that they can provide examples from their past that align with our different values through the essay prompts.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Thanks for humoring me on that one too. Laurel, you've been really patient. I know I always say this because Yale is at the end of the alphabet, but can you take us through, you have kind of these choices. So yeah, how do you, I mean, I guess, well, do whatever you want to do, but I'm dying to know, kind of how you came up with a choice because you used to have just one essay, right? There wasn't a choice. And this is kind of new for this year.
Yeah, that's right. So it's still just one essay that we ask you to write for Yale, but this year, for the first time in a while at least, we're giving you a choice of 3 different prompts that you can pick. And so I'm going to talk about them all collectively because for us, they're really all part of a whole, which is helping us understand how you approach something that really matters to you. But you'll see one of these here is framed around commitment, one is around community, and one is around a significant challenge that you've faced. And it's the first option here, the one about commitment, that was actually our sole essay prompt for the last 6 or 7 years. And we like this because your time in business school and the path that you take from there really represent a significant commitment. And it's valuable for us to understand how you previously approached a commitment of major importance in your life. But like we do every year, we sat down as a team this summer and discussed our application as a whole and whether we wanted to do anything different within the essay section. And it's been a great prompt for us and we've gotten really valuable information out of it. But the reality of a business school application is that we only get a very small window into who you are as a person. So we want to make that window as big as possible for you to tell your own unique story. And we took a step back and we asked, is this a prompt that really enables everyone to do that and enables everyone to talk about what is most important to them? Because that's really what we want to understand. What matters to you most and how have you approached it? And a commitment might be the right framework for many of you, but it's not always. And we saw that through the responses that we got over the last 6 or 7 years, that many times the stories that you wanted to tell fit into that framework, but sometimes they didn't quite. So we decided to telescope outward a bit from the sole framework of a commitment, and open up the possibility for candidates to describe what matters most through a number of different frameworks, namely that maintaining the commitment framework, but also giving you an option to talk about the community that matters most to you, or a challenge that's mattered most to you within your life. And like some of my colleagues, I think have already talked about in reference to the essays, I think essays are a great sense to get an understanding, not only of you as a candidate, but for you to understand what our school values. And I see this set of prompts as really reflective of what we value as a community at Yale. The mission of Yale SOM is to educate leaders for business and society. And so we want to bring people into the community who care about making an impact. And these tend to be people who are self-reflective, who learn from their experiences, who see something through to the end, even when it isn't easy. And I think these prompts give 3 slightly different, although potentially overlapping, opportunities to show us how you've approached something that really matters to you, that's of real importance within your life. And in SOM admissions, we're big believers that the best predictors of how you'll behave in business school and beyond are how you've behaved in the past and what you've learned from your experiences and how you've responded to past experiences. And so our whole application process is really keyed in to look for not just aspirations, but actions and evidence-based support for how you'll be as a student and an alum of Yale. And so these questions are all very grounded in the experiences that you've had to date. And so with that, just some advice there. So we care not just about your topic, your choice of topic, but also how you describe, again, that approach to this thing that matters deeply to you. And so whatever essay prompt that you choose to go with, whatever topic that you choose, you should be really specific and detailed in describing that approach, and use the follow-up prompts. And, we've given a couple of kind of notes after each of these prompts on sort of how to generate thoughts around this and where to direct your essay. Use those. I think they're good guides to getting at the sorts of things that we're hoping that you're going to express within your essay. In thinking about your topic here, I would suggest don't overthink it. When someone comes to you and says, what's most important to you, what matters most to you, there's probably 2 or 3 things that come to mind immediately, and I'd say pick from there. Don't worry about crafting the perfect or the unique topic. You're going to be able to write best and most genuinely about the things that come to mind immediately when you think about what's most important to me, what sort of occupies the most space in my life. And again, I think you'll come up with 2 or 3 things. Pick the one that feels most straightforward and most comfortable to you to write about. One thing I'll note in particular as well, don't think that everything has to sort of neatly be tied up in the end, whether it's your commitment or whether, especially with a challenge, we're not looking for something that you have necessarily tied up with a bow and is all kind of ready to present in all its glory. We're all works in progress. We're all still working through our commitments or our challenges. The challenge or commitment you pick may not even necessarily have an end to it. So I would say don't eliminate something from consideration because you feel like it's not, your best achievement story per se. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking at something that, again, you may still be approaching at this point in time. And I guess I'll conclude by saying, as much as it is valuable that we're spending the time here to talk about the essays, and as you've heard, we all use the essays, in important ways within our process. But I do want to put into perspective as well, we all practice holistic admission. While the essay can play an important role, it's not necessarily going to be the be all end all. I hope that takes a little bit of the pressure off. If you are an exceptionally strong candidate across many, many dimensions, an essay is sort of icing on the cake, but it's not going to be everything. And conversely, it's not going to completely turn around a not competitive application. It's just adding kind of shade and texture and color to the information that we have elsewhere. But I hope it takes a little bit of the pressure off.
Yeah, really well said. Shade, texture, color. I think that's a great way to think of it. And I think it's great that, yes, this is like a, Clear Admit essay insight webinar, but yeah, I would be the first to point out that, MBA admissions, one of the things I love about MBA admissions is that it is holistic. You have test scores, you have recommendations, the data forms that we said not to rush through when people are working on those. I did just want to ask you one real quick thing, and then we need to kind of move along because we're running a little late. But I wanted to ask you, Laurel, it's okay to use personal or professional stories for these essay prompts, correct? I mean, it doesn't have to be all business, right?
Yeah, there definitely is no right or wrong here. And over the years in looking at the commitment essays, I've definitely seen regional and geographic differences to who tends towards a personal or professional story. And we are agnostic as to that. I guess what I would say is I'd encourage you to think about the rest of your application and whether this is an opportunity to tell us something that isn't already
Right.
evident. We give you a lot of opportunity to talk about your professional experience, which isn't to say that your commitment doesn't, or your community or your challenge doesn't touch upon your professional commitments or aspirations. But I would say just use this as an opportunity to tell us something we haven't already heard, if that feels comfortable.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so we're going to move into the final kind of segment of the main session. And I did want to remind everyone that's tuned in that Laurel and Brad and Catherine and Jeb are all going to go into individual Zoom breakouts in a few minutes here and take your individual questions. I see some of you have been posing questions in the chat. You'll get a chance to jump off with with our panelists and ask them questions momentarily. Before we do that, I want to zip through our lightning round, and I'm going to stay with you, Laurel, and we'll go backwards through the alphabet here. Give me one essay no that you would like to share with our audience, something that like people just shouldn't do.
Don't go way over the word limit. I mean, we're not going to count words, but you're never doing yourself a favor to go over the word limit.
Yes, good. Well said. I know as a former reader myself, I just remember you often read more than one application in a sitting. And then when you get to that last application and find that what you think was going to take you 20 minutes or 30 minutes is going to take a lot longer because they paid no attention to the word count, it's not a good feeling. All right. So Catherine, how about you? One essay no.
Well, one of Laurel's colleagues once said to me, I've never gotten to the end of an essay and thought, oh, I just wish that were a little bit longer. So, yes, the word limit is great. I would say one essay no is just, there's a expression of show, don't tell. And so rather than just telling us that you have values and beliefs, showing us by giving an example, using the essay to tell a brief story as opposed to just talking about the values without anything to back them up.
Great point. Yeah, show, don't tell. I also heard someone say recently, this is a dean of admissions at one of your peer schools say, what did she say? She said, it's not just what, it's so what. Like, why did you do, what's the kind of why behind it? So anyway, Jeb, how about you? One essay no.
A lot of applicants fall into the trap of reiterating their resume, and it kind of is just a line by line recapitulation, and we can scroll up and read your resume. It's easy. This is an opportunity for synthesis. This is an opportunity to indicate that you're capable of writing at the graduate level. Yes, all of our programs require quantitative ability, but we also require you to write well and to communicate well. So again, don't reiterate your resume. It's fine to use things from your resume as kind of connecting points or talking points, but look for an opportunity to synthesize.
Okay. Yeah. And that goes with what Laura was saying earlier, this like, tell us something we haven't seen already, ideally. Brad, how about you? One essay no that you want to share?
Yeah, I think, well, probably, don't try to think about what the admissions committee wants to hear. We say that over and over again. Be yourself. I think you heard from each of us today that we want to hear about you, and each candidate has an individual story. I think I'll also add on to that just a tidbit. Don't use find and replace or spell check as the end all be all, because it won't always find that other school's name that you replaced, or it won't always find the meaning of the grammar there as well. So, read through it several times, have others read through it as well.
Great advice. Brad, I want to stay with you for this next lightning round question. Bust one myth about the MBA admissions process. I mean, we see lots of great things on clearadmit.com where candidates are speculating about, how you all call them for interview invitations or to announce acceptances, et cetera. They're always great conspiracy theories out there. So take one of them and put it to rest for us.
Yeah, there's a million of them out there, and it's always fun to learn a little bit more about them. I think for me is one myth is that everything is cut and dry, and it's not, in terms of decisions and how we make decisions, but also our processes. What we do from one year to another might change internally. I know there's a lot of talk about, well, last year they released decisions on the third Wednesday of this month, or they made calls on this day, and it, we are a little bit creatures of habit, but it may change slightly year to year based on our staffing, based on our capacity, based on what we have going on and how we're trying to get the decisions out.
Okay, great advice. Jeb, one myth that you want to bust?
Sure. I think that we adhere to a GPA and test score matrix to make decisions. That's a really reductive admissions approach. And I don't think anyone on this panel, because we all come from excellent schools, we wouldn't get the nuanced and textured and diverse classes that we get if we employed that. As an extension of that, since we are going into Q&A, please don't ask us if X score or X grade or whatever is good enough. It's a really annoying question because you're reducing yourself to a number. So don't do that. Frankly, we find those parts to be the most boring. So take that as you will.
Yeah, and that's another thing that is, I think, a little bit unique to MBA admissions. I can think of some other professional schools where there is a little bit of your GPA plus your LSAT, or might equate to some number that the committee is using in making some part of the selection. So, yeah, thanks for shedding light on that. Catherine, how about you? A myth that you want to bust?
There's no traditional MBA applicant. There's a lot of concerns out there that I'm come from a non-traditional background. I think the non-traditional background is the traditional background, and my biggest piece of advice is to be confident in your background and the experiences that you've had that have brought you to the doorsteps of an MBA program. You probably have just as much of a reason to be there as the person who comes from Wall Street. So be proud of what you've done.
Excellent. Laurel, how about you? One myth you'd like to bust?
I think it's this idea that we do head-to-head comparisons between candidates. I get lots of questions along the lines of, if you had two identical candidates, but the only difference was, and I'm always like, I'm going to stop you right there. I've never seen two identical candidates, nor do I look at two candidates side by side ever. And I hope that sort of sheds some light on why you don't need to spend so much time figuring out how am I going to be unique. It's just not the way that the process works.
Okay. Yeah, that's great to hear too. I'll stay with you, Laurel, for the last lightning round question. This is in honor of Darden's essay question. Just one thing about you that's not on your resume that you're willing to share with our
I wouldn't put it on my resume based on the idea that we always give the advice, don't put anything on your resume that you don't want to talk about or wouldn't feel comfortable highlighting. So I would never put on my resume the fact that I am a lifelong but a musician, but of very little talent. So I've played lots of different instruments, but all of them relatively poorly. I'm most proud of my self-taught ukulele.
Oh, wow. Nice. Well, there's perseverance. That's like that's an attribute that's often a good one. All right. So Catherine, how about you? One thing, this is kind of unfair because you probably sit around at the office at Darden talking about this sort of stuff, right? But what's one thing that's not on your resume that you want us to know?
Believe it or not, we do not talk a lot about this, and I haven't really thought about it until you just asked. The first thing that came to my mind is that I am a Pure Barre fanatic. And for those of you who don't know what Pure Barre is, it is an exercise studio in the US. And I've probably been to about 20 different studios and taken over 1,500 classes. And it's a little bit of a problem. So not something I'm going to brag about.
Oh, wow. Okay. I've never heard of this. Wow. Okay. But apparently there are other people who tuned in who do, because I see something coming up in the chat. All right, Jeb, how about you? What's something that's not on your resume?
Sure. I bake very well. I'm a more than adequate baker. I think being quarantined helped me refine my skills, but yeah, I enjoy it, and it's something I do between work and my doctoral program. It's a stress reliever. So I should probably go to more of Catherine's bar classes after that. But yeah, I bake pretty well.
All right, next time I'm in Philadelphia, you might get a knock on your door. Brad, how about you? Something not on the resume that you want to tell us about?
Yeah, probably I'm a sports fanatic. And so a lot of random trivia, random facts, sports history, those different types of things across a lot of different sports. There's not necessarily one that I gravitate to. There's a number. Well, there are maybe a couple that I gravitate to, but really just kind of random knowledge there as well.
Got it. Excellent. So I appreciate you guys humoring me with these lightning round questions. I've learned a ton about your processes and your essay questions. So thanks so much for shedding so much light on the way that you design these questions, what you look for, and also just the wealth of tips that you've given out today to everyone who's joined us. I'm going to let you all panelists head off into your individual Zooms, and candidates who are here in the session, stay with us because we're going to give you links to join them. But I did want to sincerely thank Laurel, Brad, Jeb, and Catherine for your time today. Enjoy your breakouts with the attendees, and yeah, we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much. Attendees, stay with me. I'm going to just stall here for a little bit as our panelists get set up in their breakouts. We do want to give them just a minute or two. And you've heard me say this the last couple of weeks if you've joined us, but it's just nice for them to be able to get settled in before they let you into their Q&A sessions. In order to make the most of your time, I just want to tell you about something that we're doing next week. Next week at this same time, we happen to have one of our ClearAdmit Plus webinars. This is like a free webinar. It's technically a private webinar series because you have to be a registered ClearAdmit site user, but that doesn't cost you anything. So if you register on our site, you have access to the private webinar series. It meets once a month. And so it'll meet next Wednesday at noon Eastern. And the topics that we're going to cover next week, if memory serves, it'll be with me and with Alex Brown, who some of you may know is the co-host of the ClearAdmit podcast with me. And we're going to be talking about round one interview prep. So just kind of everything you need to know about interviewing at these schools. We'll also be talking round two strategy if you're someone who's still working on apps and thinking about getting them in round two. And probably a whole bunch of other stuff. We always just end up on a number of different topics. You also can ask questions. So we'll have kind of an Ask Me Anything component to this. So please join us. You do need to sign up in advance. And if you're someone who comes regularly, that's new. We didn't used to do that, but we're making it so that you have to sign up. So please, you can go to our website. If you're a registered user on the site, just click on ClearAdmit Plus and you'll see the information about the webinar series. If you're not a registered user, just go to the site and you can quickly set up a user account. You just need to give us an email and answer some basic questions. So yeah, please join us next week. It'll be a lot of fun and we'll, get to really talk interviews and round two strategy and stuff. So please come on out. I think we're now ready to give you all the links to the breakout rooms. The other thing I was going to say is that each of you will get an email with a link to Yale, Wharton, Darden, and Ross's breakout rooms. So you'll have them all. And the reason I say that is because you can't be in multiple ones at the same time. So make sure you check your emails. You'll have the links there. We're also going to post them here in the chat. But you may want to copy and paste them if you're only relying on the chat, because once you leave this webinar, you will no longer have access to this chat. And I see that we did just post up the webinar registration for next week. So thanks to Mike for doing that. In any event, thank you all for joining us. We'll get you the links right now in the chat here so that you can head off and ask all those great questions that I'm sure you have for Yale and Wharton and Darden and Ross. But thank you so much for attending. And, for those of you who've been with us the last couple of weeks, especially, really appreciate it. I know your time is valuable. You all have jobs, et cetera. And best of luck as you set out on the MBA admissions process. I wish everyone the best of luck and hope you get into all the schools you apply to. So thank you so much.